Hi there, this is Dr. Monica Agarwal. Welcome to another episode of Seeking Voices. I had the pleasure of interviewing a pretty awesome man, Ocean Robbins. Ocean, for those of you who don't know him, is a co-founder and CEO of the million-member Food Revolution Network. He's the author of the bestsellers 31-Day Food Revolution and Real Superfoods. Ocean founded Youth for Environmental Sanity at age 16 and directed it for the next 20 years. He has spoken in person to more than 250,000 people, organized online seminars and events reaching more than 1 million people, and facilitated leadership development events for leaders from 65 nations. He has served as adjunct professor for Chapman University and is the recipient of the National Jefferson Award for Outstanding Public Service, the Freedom Flame Award, and the Harmon Wilkinson Award, and many other honors. His TEDx talk, Eating Our Way to Happiness, has been seen by more than 1 million people. What I like about Ocean is that he's a kind, gentle soul, and he's such a pleasure to talk to. I met him when he invited me to speak on his Food Revolution Network a few years ago, and it's been a pleasure to know him. I hope you enjoy spending time with him like I have here today. Please join us. So great to see you, Mr. Ocean Robbins. It's been a pleasure to hear and talk to you and know you for the last several years, and a pleasure to have you on my podcast here today.
Thrilled to be with you, Monica.
Yes, thank you so much. So, I've been curious about you, Ocean, and your family for some time now, and since I've gotten to know you, and just to give you some background, the audience some background, I met Ocean a couple of years ago when we were doing some filming for the Food Revolution Network, which he owns and is the CEO of. And that's how we sort of got to know each other. And we're going to talk a lot about the Food Revolution Network, which I'm excited about. But I thought it would be fun to start by talking about your beginnings, because what many of you may not know is that Ocean Robbins is actually the grandson of Irv Robbins, who started Baskin-Robbins, and so I thought maybe you could start there. Tell us about your childhood and where that started.
So my grandpa Irv founded Baskin-Robbins with his brother-in-law, Bert Baskin. And they flipped a coin, by the way, to determine whether it was Robbins Baskin or Baskin Robbins. And my dad's uncle Bert won the toss. My dad, John, grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard and 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer. And he was groomed to one day join in running what became the world's largest ice cream company. And yet he felt called in a different direction and wound up in the 1960s, in his early 20s, when he was offered the chance, declining. And he left any access to the company or the family wealth and followed his own rocky road, as we put it in our family. And my dad ended up moving with my mom to a little island off the coast of Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their kid Ocean. And they almost named me Kale, by the way, and this is way before Kale was cool. So I'm super glad they took the more conservative route when they named their kid. But we did eat a lot of kale, and as well as cabbage and carrots and onions and other veggies from the garden. And when I got a little older, we moved to California in 1984, and that's when my dad began working on a book called Diet for a New America, which came out in 87, and it became this runaway bestseller. It was about how our food choices affect our health and our happiness and the future of life on Earth. And one of his readers ended up being my grandpa Irv. So my grandpa had lost his brother-in-law and business partner, Bert Baskin, to heart disease when my dad's uncle Bert was just 54 years old. And now in his late 60s, my grandpa was facing serious heart issues himself, as well as diabetes and weight issues. His doctors told him he didn't have long to live unless he made some big changes. And then they gave him a copy of my dad's book, Diet for New America. Now, my grandpa hadn't read it at that point, but he did read the copy the doctors gave him, and he followed its advice, and he ended up giving up sugar and cutting way down on processed foods and eating way more whole plant foods, cutting way down on meat, and he even gave up ice cream.
Wow.
And Grandpa Irv got incredible results. I mean, he reversed his diabetes, he reversed his heart disease, he got off a bunch of medications he'd been told he'd have to take for the rest of his life. His favorite part was that his golf game improved 7 strokes. My favorite part was that he lived 19 more healthy years. And so we've really seen in our family that when you follow the standard American diet, you get the standard American diseases, right? And we've also seen what can happen when you make a change at a super personal level. And, a lot of people talk about how hard it is to change their diets and their lifestyles. My grandpa was one stubborn cookie. And if anybody ever had investment in thinking that there's no connection between food and health, it was him. I mean, he'd manufactured and sold more ice cream than any human being who'd ever lived on the planet. And newsflash, ice cream is no health food. But he made a change because he wanted to live. And I think that kind of opens up hope for all of us that we can make changes too. And so, I've been on a path of looking throughout my life at how I could spread the word about health and sustainability. And I founded a nonprofit when I was a teenager called Yes, and we worked with young leaders in 65 countries around the globe. And our goal was empowering young people who were up to something to be more effective as agents of change. And we worked all over the planet, and I ran that for 20 years. And what I saw was that everybody eats. And all over the world, the modern industrialized diet is spreading. And with it, hospitals are filling up. People are getting sick with diseases that were unheard of in generations past. And we're destroying the planet. And so I saw that food has become perhaps the most environmentally destructive force on the planet. And it's devastating lives, families, and health. But at the same time, we also see that healthy food for our bodies and for our planet can be a doorway to incredible benefits. And so I decided after 20 years running that nonprofit to focus on food directly. And I joined with my dad in launching Food Revolution Network in 2012. And we've now grown to over 1 million members. And, our mission today is healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for all.
Love that. So I want to go back because I do find this history interesting. I mean, why do you think, and you've probably talked this over with your dad, why do you think he changed? Like, he grew up in a house that was a certain way. Do you think it was the times? It was the 1960s. It was sort of becoming more, I mean, that was the time. Why do you think that was it his mom that was maybe interested in nutrition a little bit more? I find that interesting that he just said, you know what, to heck with this. I'm out of here. I'm leaving this money behind and I'm going on this other path.
It was in the 60s in Berkeley. My parents met at UC Berkeley. It was a wild time for sure. My dad was very involved in protesting the war in Vietnam, in joining the civil rights movement. As a teenager, he went to the South and spent months volunteering and marching with Dr. King and movement leaders at a time when doing so was quite controversial. My grandfather was not a fan. He was horrified that my dad would do such a thing, but my dad really had this calling to follow his own star and to be true to his sense of conscience that was awakening in his own heart. And, he just got clearer and clearer to him that running an ice cream company was not why God put him on this earth. And so it was very hard because he had to disappoint his father immensely.
Yeah.
My grandpa, this was his dream that his son would follow in his footsteps, and he was offering him the keys to the kingdom. How many young men would walk away from a chance to have that kind of wealth and power and opportunity? But my dad felt that some things are more important than the almighty dollar, and conscience and contribution were what that was for him. And he didn't know where the path would lead, but he knew that that wasn't his path. So my mom, bless her heart, supported him every step of the way. And how many young women would join their life mate and say, okay, yeah, walk away from, hundreds of millions of dollars potentially so that we can live in the woods in a one-room cabin.
Yeah.
Yes, I support you 100%, but that's exactly what she did. So I think they were really choosing love and conscience over money, even without knowing where the path would lead. And, in our society, I think that really means something because a lot of us have made money more important than human life, than the survival of the planet, than our own integrity and our own health. We burn ourselves out, and we're willing to exploit and dominate and control so we can get more. And at the end of the day, what's it all for? Do we really take money with us when we die? I don't think so. Um, Not that money isn't important, not that we don't need to live, and that it isn't really helpful to have financial resources in this world, but not at the expense of our core integrity, our core values. I think we all have a sense of purpose at some level for why we were born and what we're here for, and we have to be true to that. And money can be a tool towards that, but it is not an end in itself. And my dad was reckoning with all those questions. And in the 60s, it was a time when a lot of people were thinking boldly outside the box, and that wave probably helped a lot. But then he and my mom chose to move to the little cabin and grow their food and practice yoga and meditation and live like ascetics, for quite some time. And they were really trying, as they put it, to weave themselves back into the web of life, to rediscover natural rhythms and their own sense of place in it all. And out of that came the calling then to step back into the world, and see if they could help. And hence Diet for New America and all that ensued from there. And, it's kind of a hero's journey, I suppose, to like leave the kingdom, go off, Siddhartha sort of story, right? Go off into the wilderness, follow your own path, develop some wisdom, and then come back to serve if you can. And I find it quite profound that my parents undertook that journey.
Yeah, I mean, it really is incredible. I always think of that King quote that actually has driven and helped me so many times in my life, which is, it's not that you have to know what the whole road looks like. You just have to have faith in that first step. And it's almost like,
Yeah.
he had faith that he knew that this wasn't the path and he needed something else and he wasn't sure how it was going to go. And so, but, just had faith that it would be okay. What was it like? What was life like growing up that way? Was there contact with Grandpa Irv, and did you have this pull, or how did you feel about that relationship? Or, and not trying to get into your personal business, certainly, is more as a global sense of like what the conflict must feel like and does the kid feel a conflict?
Yeah, I definitely did. I mean, I will say that, first of all, I felt loved as a child, and I think that's profoundly important and significant. Of course, every family has its challenges, and people can hear the story and think, oh, he had a perfect childhood. No, I didn't have a perfect childhood. There were plenty of challenges and hardships along the way. Our family had dysfunction and trauma, like every family does. And my parents were always on a growing learning path. And I got to be in that with them in some profound ways. When we'd visit my grandparents or they would visit us, it was often tense. I think that there were a few years when my grandparents and my parents didn't speak. My grandpa was so hurt that my dad had made that choice, and he was quite bitter about it. And after he sold Baskin-Robbins when my dad didn't want to join him in it, and then he didn't like what happened to the company. He'd had certain values. For example, under his reign, if you will, there were, I think, about 1,000 franchise owners. Every one of them succeeded. But then when he sold the company, they scaled up a lot, and they started having way more franchise owners, way more stores, but also a lot that didn't succeed because they weren't committed to their success. And from my grandpa's perspective, every one of those people was putting their life and their livelihood on the line, and they deserved 100% chance of winning.
Sure.
But there was a new formula that was about scaling, and the company no longer held those values. So my grandpa felt very bitter about a lot of things that happened in the company, and he blamed my dad for all of them. If my
Wow.
dad had stayed, this wouldn't have happened, and yet
That's heavy.
it is. And so the relationship was tense, and we also ate very differently. And quite frankly, my grandfather had spent his life trying to build financial resources. He grew up in the Great Depression. In his world, money was not, he didn't think that money was equaled happiness, but he did think that it was impossible to be happy without it.
Yeah.
And my parents were choosing a path that had very little money for a time, and my grandpa pitied them and was horrified that I was growing up in poverty.
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
But, as we got a little older, as I got a little older, and when Diet for an America came out, suddenly my dad became this celebrity and was on national talk shows. And my grandpa started having people at the country club talking about the book that my dad had written.
Right.
And then, of
Right.
course, the work saved my grandpa's life. There was this remarkable transformation, and they were still very different in terms of values. But, my dad and I were with him on his deathbed, and, which occurred, decades later. And, um,
There was
and at
peace,
that
it
point,
sounds like.
yeah. And my grandpa said then, he said, when you left Baskin-Robbins, I thought you were crazy, but thank God some of us have lived long enough to learn a few new things.
No, it's a
And
beautiful
and
thing
thank
to
God that
hear.
you followed your own star. And he said, and I'm proud of you. And, he looked at me and told me he was proud of me for what I was doing. And, he wasn't a lovey-dovey type. I don't think I ever heard the words I love you from him towards anybody, but I felt love.
That's nice. That's beautiful. And, such a nice story of how we all have the ability to change, right? I mean, and that we all can change at any point, and there's no too late, which is so
Yeah.
great. So you grew up with these super cool hippie parents, conservative grandparents, hippie parents, and then there was you. Like, what would be three things that you were taught growing up? Like, what were the three core values, or a few core values that you were taught growing up that maybe have shaped the way you've lived your life?
One of the core values was my dad used to quote Thoreau, I make myself rich by making my wants few. And the notion that wanting things tends to be a recipe for unhappiness. Now, that's different than having a sense of purpose or mobilization. That could easily slide into a kind of, resignation. But in reality, what does it mean to truly choose what we want and make sure that it's aligned with our core values rather than wanting things that are sort of part of the commercial agenda? Advertising is really good at making us want things we don't need and spend money on things we don't need. That's the whole purpose of marketing in many cases. And so my dad was really good at dissecting that and disengaging from that. And having grown up in a family where marketing was an art, he now understood the industry and also chose to really separate. So that was one piece. And then the next piece is this statement that I used to hear often growing up, that those of us will be truly happy who have found how to serve. And so I feel like the sense that each of us has a need actually to be of contribution to the lives of others, to be of service in some meaningful way. And again, in our consumeristic and narcissistic sort of culture, a lot of us forget that. And we think that happiness comes from how much we can consume or exploit, or how high we can climb up to the top of the mountain on a pile of dead bodies, rather than how much we can contribute to the well-being of others. And I grew up in a family where the ethos was that you can be the most fulfilled and happy with contribution. And then I would say another piece was that food is medicine and nourishment, not cheap entertainment. So, we live in a culture where our food system is toxic. It's killing us, it's killing our planet. And I grew up in a family where we really thought of food as a way to nourish our bodies, to practice self-love and self-care, and as a kind of medicine, if you will, not cheap entertainment. And the critical piece here, Monica, is that there's more pleasure in a body that works, in a mind that's clear, in a life that's fulfilling. And if you seek your pleasure primarily from all the things that bring you alive and help you contribute to the well-being of others, there's so much more joy in that than in a bag of Doritos or, a bag of cookies that might taste really good for a few seconds. But as soon as that bite is swallowed, what fate have you sealed for your intestines? What are you doing to your cholesterol levels? What are you doing to your A1C levels? And how is that going to affect your brain function and your vitality and your sleep that night and your self-respect? So for me, the sense that food can be a pathway towards self-love and vitality and joy has been a positive feedback loop. Yes, you give up short-term, pleasure in a certain way, but to be honest, once you learn how to enjoy it, I mean, I ate sprouts this morning with a nice dressing, and I loved it. Every bite was delicious to me because I've learned to cultivate that relationship. And a lot of us in a toxic food culture are not really the authors of our food lives because we're fundamentally addicted to foods that are killing us. But I'm
Yes.
interested now in helping people break free.
No, it's so beautiful. I mean, there's so many things I want to unpack in the three values or that you said. I love that the eating healthy is a way to self-love. I love that. But before
Mhm.
I tap into that, because that I think will lead us into the food revolution concept, I want to think about your second concept value first, where you said about the inherent need or desire to serve. And this
Yeah.
is something I'm very interested in and intrigued by because I often wonder about when I watch people and I talk to people, do you believe that we naturally have the desire as human beings to serve? Do we have the natural desire to be compassionate and that it's just hidden? Or maybe it's more of a learned behavior and it's something that maybe we have to cultivate, or maybe it's both.
Well, I think of it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or Tony Robbins talks about the six human needs. And essentially, your first need is going to be for survival,
Yep.
and safety and security. If you don't have food to eat, if you don't have a roof over your head, that's going to loom pretty large, just basic survival, right? If
Right.
you can't breathe and your plane's going down, get your oxygen mask on first before helping others, right? But then after that, you have other needs as you move up the chain, right? You need variety, you need experience, you need adventure, you need growth. And at a certain point, you need contribution and service. And so if the basic needs are met, then service kicks in, I think, for all of us at some point. And, we also recognize that service and survival are not so separate. For example, if you don't take care of your family, who's going to be there to take care of you, right? And for a lot of us, our own sense of survival is deeply linked to the well-being of those closest to us. I don't know a lot of parents who don't recognize that their own kids' survival is a paramount fundamental need for them, right? So that's a kind of service in a way, right?
Mm.
But it's linked to our own identity and our own core values. So I would assert that we actually have a need to be of contribution to the world around us in a broader sense than even just our immediate family, that we're part of a wider human family, if you will. And all of us care about the course of things on the planet. And when we have our basic core survival needs met, that caring has more room to expand in our hearts if we allow it to. And, we all live in a world that is facing some dire problems. And it could be easy when you really look at the statistics and the perils before us to shrink your heart, to shrink your dreams, and even to shrink your prayers to a more small level, because it hurts to want a better world for humanity and then face the specter of systemic environmental collapse, climate crisis, war, violence, political breakdown, all of the dangers that we seem to be facing as a species. And yet, my perspective is that when you face pain, your heart either expands or contracts. That's the fundamental choice. If your heart contracts, your world gets smaller,
Mm.
and that's one way of coping. Or your heart can expand and allow that pain to be a part of your experience, even if you can't fix it.
Mm.
And to me, that's part of what I think evokes our compassion and our caring, not because we can solve everything, but because maybe we can do something. And to me, hope isn't so much a noun as a verb, and it comes from who we are and how we live and the choices we make. And hope is alive as long as we're taking actions that are consistent with our values and our integrity. So I look at the choices that I make and I ask, how can I in some way be an instrument, as Saint Francis said, be an instrument of peace, bring some love into this world, bring some beauty into this world. And that to me is part of what deepens my happiness and perhaps my sense of humanity. And I'm not altruistic just because it helps somebody out there. It really does help me cope and help me have more sense of meaning and purpose. It feels good to be on the right side of history, at least some of the time, and to have a life that has some sense of integrity or purpose or coherence with my core values. It feels good. And with food, like there's no one perfect thing. Like if you just eat this one food, you'll be perfect. No, it's actually diversity that's critical. You know, we're learning now that we need a diversity of plants, for example, to have a healthy microbiome. Not just you could eat kale all day and you would die, you know, like if you ate nothing but kale. It's awesome, but it's not the whole picture, right? You need diversity of wholesome foods, and it's that mix. And I think we need diversity in our guts. We need diversity in our diets. We need diversity in our minds, in our relationships. And that's part of what makes us more whole. And it's very contrary to the sort of fundamentalist ideology that a lot of us also tend towards, that if everyone just thought the way we did and did things the way we did, everything would be okay. It's probably not that way. Everyone brings their own piece to the puzzle, their own part to the whole.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think the key is that we're all on this journey, right? And so, and not all the journeys lead to A or B or to this point. And I think learning and embracing the fact that we came from different places and we'll end different places is also okay, as long as we're all walking towards something, I think is
Yeah.
the way I sort of like to think about it. So let's
Yeah.
talk about that third value, which I think is which brought you towards the Food Revolution Network, and you've already touched on it a lot, which is the sort of food as medicine component and the food towards how food is in some ways a self-care. You know, how do you talk to people who say, and maybe grandpa was one of those people who believe that they just can't change, like they don't feel that they have the ability, they've eaten a certain way for so long that they don't like the texture, they don't like anything about it, they're okay, one, with killing animals because they don't find that that's an ethical issue, they don't feel that animals are at the same level as
Sure.
humans, one. And then those are the people who they're okay killing animals. And then the second thing is the people who are okay with killing animals, but then also don't really they just can't imagine a world without those foods in their life. Like, how do you reconcile that? How do you motivate people to see another way?
Well, the cool thing with food is that there's a lot of paths in and they all lead to good things, you know. So some people are motivated to eat a whole foods plant-based diet because they're concerned about the planet or they're concerned about the welfare of animals. And by the way, animal welfare isn't just a matter of killing, but also factory farms and treatment of animals and the way that antibiotic resistant bacteria in turn impacts human bodies and well-being. So these are connected. But let's suppose that you're only interested in your own health and that's the focus for you. That's okay. You know, the reality is that moving towards a whole foods plant-based diet can add 5, 10, 15 healthy years of life to the average person. You know, there's a great deal of research on this. A study published a couple years ago in PLOS Medicine found that moving from a typical diet to an optimal diet, even as late as the age of 60, could add 8 more healthy years of life. Even at the age of 80, it added 2. And we're talking healthy years, not just years, right? So a lot of people would love to add 8 years of life or 2 years of life, or if they start sooner, they could add even more. That's just diet. When you add lifestyle, of course, exercise, sleep, healthy relationships, the numbers just shoot up even higher. And I think the beautiful thing I see for a lot of people is maybe their door in is just personal health. While they're at it, while they're eating a whole foods plant-based diet, suddenly they like the fact, like it's a nice bonus that their ecological footprint just went down. It's a nice bonus to think, oh my gosh, I'm not contributing to rainforest destruction or habitat destruction. I'm contributing to rewilding. I'm contributing to lower carbon footprint. It's a nice feeling. It might not be a driver for action for some people, but it doesn't hurt, you know? And it doesn't hurt to think, oh my gosh, I'm not killing animals. And we start to realize that the image of animals in factory farms always did cause a bit of guilt, always did cause a bit of discomfort. And it's nice to not be doing that anymore. So I think for a lot of people, that door in can actually lead to more compassion and more sense of caring. Because to be honest, it's easy to, part of what shuts us down, I think, to our natural compassion is guilt. is the feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't want to feel caring about this because I'm doing stuff that's hurting the world or hurting animals, and I don't want to think about that. Well, when you're not doing that stuff anymore, it's easier to think about it. There's less charge. So I think those can all work. And by the way, you don't have to be a vegetarian or an animal rights person, to think that animals should be treated decently or to want to take care of your health. And there are many paths to a better world, but I think food is one of the strongest ones.
So tell us about how this Food Revolution Network started and how did you get into this? How did you write? And tell us about your book, 31 Day Food Revolution. How did this all come about?
Well, we started it in 2012, and my dad was a best-selling author, and he'd inspired a lot of people, and had built a little bit of a nest egg of his own now, him and my mom, that we were looking to care for our special needs twins. My wife and I had identical twin boys born in 2001 who were on the autism spectrum. And then in 2008, the Madoff crisis happened, and my family's financial advisor had put all of their life savings in what turned out to be a fund that was invested in the Madoff Ponzi scheme. And so essentially 99% of my parents' life savings, as well as ours, were wiped out overnight. And then, that triggered a lot of concern, obviously, and fear. And ultimately, I ended up moving on from the nonprofit that I had founded to found Food Revolution Network, partly because I wanted to see if we could build a business that was socially minded, that would help my parents to be able to retire in dignity, help to generate the resources to be able to care for my special needs twins for life, and also make an even bigger impact on the planet. And so, in the nonprofit space, number one, you can't take a very large salary because it's not appropriate, but also you either have to choose between putting your time on fundraising or putting your time on programs, but they're separate, right? And with Food Revolution Network, our thought was, let's build a business that embedded in its DNA is positive impact. And the more money we make, the more good we're doing, right? And then we can scale that up and grow that. And we've had some success. Food Revolution Network has grown to over 1 million members now, and we have 27 staff. And I feel so grateful to be able to do something that really matters. And we have generated some financial resources that also are supportive to my parents, to my kids, to my family. And that really feels good to me as well. And we're a certified B Corp now, which also feels good. So, which means that we're, officially certified as being chartered as being about making the world a better place, not just profits. And so that's kind of how it started. And we started with a Food Revolution Summit, and that's still our biggest project, but we have online courses and master classes and films and a membership community and a plant-based coaching certification and many other resources now. If you go to foodrevolution.org/about, you can learn more about what we're up to and all the resources we have. And we've written a bunch of books too, including 31 Day Food Revolution is my bestseller. And that's a simple focus on how you can understand and implement healthy lifestyle for wonderful results. Every chapter ends with 3 simple action steps you can take to move towards greater health with your food. And the 31 is not accidental, because we're basically saying, at the end of the day, 31 steps to health can bring you more pleasure, more satisfaction, and more well-being than 31 flavors of ice cream. And the book is divided into 4 parts. So part 1 is detoxify. It's focusing on getting rid of the bad stuff that makes us sick. Part 2 is nourish. It focuses on saying yes to the good stuff that really helps you thrive. Part 3 is gather, which is about your social network and how you build community around healthy food and accountability and relationships that nourish your values. And then part 4 is transform. And that's where we look at how food can be a tool to help change the world. And we look at the revolution, really, and how we can change the world for the better.
I love that. It's so beautiful when you say it that way in the 4 parts. It's quite lovely to think about, and to think about that journey too. Again, I always come back to that quote from King. I mean, you just had faith at the beginning that something was going to happen, and you've come out with this beautiful project and this book and the program. And how wonderful is it that you have found you've allowed your passion and desire to change and improve the earth has now become a way for you to also feed your family, which is such a special thing.
Yes.
Foodrevolution.org to find out more about Ocean Robbins. Why don't you, if you could, tell us maybe 3 things you want us to do to change our lives sustainably? If you could say, like, okay, Monica, just do these 3 things and you're going to be okay. Now, obviously, that's not totally true, as we pointed out, and as you pointed out, that we really need diversity in the way we eat, but it's also in the way we think and the way we do and what we do. We can't exercise the same way every day. We have to always change it up. We also can't eat the same way every day. We have to change it up. But if I were to ignore all the facts that you need diversity and you had to bottle it down or simplify it down to 3 things, like what 3 things should we do for the person who's listening, who's like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, this is super overwhelming. What 3 things should I focus on?
Okay. Well, I'd start with food is nourishment, not entertainment.
Okay.
Not that you can't enjoy your food, but make sure nourishment comes first in your food life. Like that
Okay.
simple pivot can lead to so much more well-being and pleasure and joy.
So reminding ourselves that we want to eat food that makes us sustainable and stronger and healthier, but we're not eating it to get comfort. We're not eating it for it has a sustainability purpose rather than a
Well, I would say not for entertainment. I think it can be very comforting, very nourishing, and very loving to feed ourselves well. But rewiring our brain to associate that with the loving foods that love us back rather than loving foods that kill us.
Okay. I like that.
In
I
essence,
like that.
right?
Yeah.
And then I would say number 2 is going to be, um, ask how you can be on the right side of history, in ways large or small, recognizing that at the end of the day, your happiness is not separate from the happiness of others. So, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go out and save the world by yourself or carry the world's burdens on your shoulders, but just do something, that matters. Helen Keller said, I'm one person, I can't do everything, but that doesn't mean I'll refuse to do that which I can. So do what you can and do something and see if that doesn't make you feel better.
And then starting at, not taking on the massive role of fixing the world is so overwhelming, but as you're pointing out, just even doing something in your own community or even with a friend or a family member or one small step can be impactful, and that's important.
Yeah. And then the third thing I would say is just nourish healthy relationships, like love people who love you back, and cultivate connection with your loved ones. So many people on their deathbed say, oh, I wish I'd spent more time with people I love, and we forget to appreciate people. We forget to say, I love you. We forget to invest in those relationships. So don't let that happen. Live knowing that you're mortal and you don't know any day could be your last, and say goodbye, to your sweetheart, to people you care about, to your kids when you go away for the day, remembering that. Like, let those moments of meaning show up in your life and keep looking at how you can cultivate a more open heart and a more connected heart and invest in people and things that you cherish.
That's so beautiful.
That will bring more meaning, more beauty, and more health to your well-being. There's a saying, what we appreciate appreciates. So keep expressing that appreciation and that love for life, for people, for things that you care about, and notice that actually invests in building more of those sensations.
Beautiful, Ocean. What's next for you?
Next for me, I mean, I
more
want
the same.
I just want to change the way the world eats. That's all.
More of the same. I mean, I think that more of the good and growing what you're doing is incredible. Like, if you I hope that when people listen to you, because I think what you say and you said in this journey, in this conversation, is so beautiful and filled with so much passion, but also provides people with these tools to empower them. Like, I can go out there, I can join the Food Revolution Summit, I can join the community, I can get the book, I can do all of these things. I think that You deliver and talk with such passion and love that I think people are really going to be impressed and hopefully be motivated to change. So if you've done one thing today, you've done that.
Thank you.
Which is a
That's
small,
not a
which is not a small task.
not a small thing, no.
Not a
All
small
right. Thank you
task.
so much for having me on and for a very, very beautiful conversation.
Thank you, Ocean. Best to you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Monica. I hope you enjoyed the podcast as much as I did recording it. If you're looking for additional opportunities to take control of your health, check out one of my online workshops where you can take a deep dive into concrete steps to foster change. Visit askmonica.me/workshops. That's askmonica.me/workshops to learn more. If you're looking for more specific advice for your own personal medical condition, I offer telehealth visits where we discuss your personal concerns and create an individualized plan. Find all the details at askmonica.me/visit. That's askmonica.me/visit. Thank you for joining and be well.